Hey vinyl community, Jeff here again, and guess what? It's time for another of my year countdown type thing, top 10 great albums that I own on vinyl from X amount of year, and this is up to 1993. So I've been doing this for a while. Again, just to tell you the guidelines of how I'm doing this, these are 10 great albums from a year that I happen to own presently on vinyl. So I wasn't digging into CDs. Probably a lot of great albums that get missed only because I'm limited to what I've got on vinyl. So if you think there's an album in 1993 that I can't believe Jeff didn't mention that, chances are I don't have the album, and you can send it to me. So there you go. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of great things out there, but looking at just the ones that I currently own on vinyl, there's still plenty. Now, the 90s, we're moving into that era. You got the Nirvanas and the stuff and the whole alt music and grunge and all that coming out, which I am just not on board with. So how does a member like me survive in through the 90s when all of this music is going around and things are changing? Well, you're about to see the kind of stuff that kept me alive through the 90s, because we're in the 90s now. So here we go. So let's jump right into this. I don't want this dragging on too long. The first one I'm going to do, I've done this in the past, is just to show an EP. The EPs are not counting in the 10. It just happened to be notable of something that came out on EP at that time, and that's PeterCriss. Now, this is actually the full album, Chris Cat Number 1. But this is a vinyl reissue that includes the EP. So I do have the ability to show the fact that it includes the EP. And that's so the EP came out, and I remember ordering it through a magazine. There was like an ad in the back of a magazine to buy this thing from this company. I forget the magazine, probably some music magazine, but it wasn't like it was on the store shelves or something. I saw this and I thought, ooh, I'm going to order that. I ordered that, and I think it had about like 4 or 5 songs. So, but ultimately, so it had those songs on there, and I listened to that for quite a while. And then the actual full album came out, and a couple of the songs from the EP were not on the album, which made the EP worth having. I don't know why I didn't keep it, but so the album has most of the songs, but not all of them. So the EP is those extra bonus tracks are included, you know, on here on this double release. So you know, it's contained in here. So you have the album and the EP. So there you go. PeterCriss did that. He had been gone since the 80s, as far as he did a couple solo albums right after leaving Kiss, and not much since. And then in '93 he pops back up with this album. And you can see he's got the makeup, and the makeup is like totally wrong because he didn't own the rights to it at that point. So it's close, but not the same. So, but yeah, great stuff. One of the songs kind of makes fun of Gene and Paul. But overall, it was just a great hard rocking album. And so, yeah, there you go. A resurgence, a resurrection of PeterCriss's music in format there. All right, so now, these are just 10 albums. I put them in order, ranking them based on how I feel today. I could go back and forth, and so don't hold me to these as far as anything. My one endeavor into the modern music at the time, I don't really call them grunge, but CollectiveSoul was one of those alt-rock type bands, whatever you want to call them. Now, I admit in '93, I didn't really, I knew the songs, but didn't get really into them. I got into the band a little later, but in my mind, this is one of the pivotal bands of the decade of that time that I was really listening to, that I have continued to listen to. They have a new album that just came out. I've been listening to that. I love their stuff. I know it's really off base for, you know, somebody who's mostly into metal, but CollectiveSoul just played Saturday night this past weekend up at Busch Gardens. I have a Busch Gardens season pass. I was going to see CollectiveSoul, and literally 2 days before, my band got a last-minute gig offer at a place that we really like to play, and we took it, and I'm kicking myself. A friend of mine who I didn't know was going to the show, former bandmate of mine, sends us texts every once in a while. He sent the text back to all of the former band with pictures, and, you know, of CollectiveSoul, and I'm like, dude, I didn't even know you were going, but man, I was supposed to be there, and I would have been sitting right there by you had I known, not had this gig that popped up, and had I known you were there. So anyway, still love these guys to this day, love their music, and this is where it all started with their first album. Everybody knows Shine, probably their biggest song from here, but it's just an overall great album. The album itself, in my mind, would love to be remixed. It's a little muddy. All the other albums that came after this, I love them all for all various reasons. So there you go. That one's going to be at number 10. This is another one that's a little off. The LostDogs. Little Red Riding Hood. Yeah. So nobody's in. Who's gonna know about the Lost Dogs? Lost Dogs. Aside from me having them, so the Lost Dogs super group type thing, singer from the '77s, bands that you know are in the Christian realm. Various bands from alternate to punkish to commercial. You know, I'm not going to go through all the names, but it's 4 guys from 4 popular bands got together and they released an album a year or so before this, which is still to this day one of my favorite albums. I really would love to see it released on vinyl. This is their second album, so when this came out, I ate it up. Not quite the same impact as the first album had on me, but it still has a great impact. I don't know, the first one just really clicked with me, resonated with me, even the covers that they did. But so when this came out, I was eating it up. It's got all kinds of great stuff. It's a little more folksy, a little at times rocky, a little at times tongue-in-cheek. Satire, you know, it's got some silliness. Got a song in here about bad indigestion. And it's got about things you eat and the things it makes you do in the bathroom and all that stuff. So, but yes, so this was a Kickstarter program they released a couple years ago, and I snatched it up. Snatched it up absolutely on vinyl. It also came with a 7-inch, which is in my 7-inch collection, which was a bonus they threw in. Love the Lost Dogs. Very much a different style of music for what I'm used to. Hey, this one's kind of the same way. XL and the DBD, Death Before Dishonor. So this is Sodom in America. The band idea is, so it's a rap metal type album. So you got the singer who also plays guitar, and he's got all kinds of musician friends, everybody from guys from the Crucified, guys from Deliverance, coming in and playing on the album. And it's like metal with some rappy type lyrics on top. Comes off really well. He's done some newer stuff since then, but this was like where it all started. And I just absolutely wore this record out back in the day. So it was reissued on vinyl in 2022. So I was excited about that because I don't think it ever had a vinyl release before. But I remember this. I wore this CD out. It was just some great stuff, and love all the stuff that they've continued to do under the XL name. Now, for the lottery, I got the letter X, and this did come to mind. But I'm pretty sure that the winner of the lottery is not going to want any XL on the DVD. So, but it's one of the X's that I know in my collection. But yeah, so there you go. Check him out. It's like I said, he's got a lot of stuff out there under XL. Is still going strong with some music that he's put out in the past couple years after many years away. All right, and then we move a little more into what you would probably associate with me. Tamplin, sort of kind of the first Tamplin album, but he did have an album called Tamplin and Friends before this, but this is really kind of where he solidified as a sort of a band. It's not so much akin to Tamplin solo album, but it kind of really is. It's what he did after Shout. Straight up melodic, powerful metal of the day, hair metal, hard rock, whatever you want to call it. But he just comes out of the gate screaming with just some amazing high production, high quality, amazing vocals, amazing guitar. Just overall a great album. Was glad they reissued this on vinyl a couple years ago. Great stuff. Tamplin continued to put out stuff after this, both for the band Tamplin and under the name Ken Tamplin. Not sure how big of a difference they were as far as that. It's just probably the difference in musicians and how they build it, but had to include this. This is just one of the albums in '93 that really rocked my boat. And then one of my favorite bands had come back and they put out Miracle Mile. We got Guardian. They continue to put out great music, and this was just the album that blew us away in 1993. They had, of course, they had a first album that, and then they changed singers, and then, so they continued on with Jamie on vocals, and this was just another one in their, another notch in their belt of greatness that they put out in 1993. Miracle Mile had they had a video in here. They had some other video releases on VHS tape we used to watch back in the day. So, but yeah, love this album. It's, again, melodic, what you would consider, people are going to rank it into that, hard rock and hair metal of the day, that kind of feel. They were still going strong with that. Similar in style, FearNot, their first album, is just to me one of a pivotal rock anthem album. It's like the vocals were right in the sweet spot, the songwriting was right in the sweet spot, the sing-along, great, the power of the background vocals, everything about this was, what you would consider the early 90s hair, sleaze, metal, rock, whatever you want to call it, of the day. This album just struck me as just amazing. Was also so glad that they reissued this on vinyl a couple years ago. The band has gotten back together and has released some new material in the past 5 years. And their most recent album from last year, so is absolutely killer. Different singer. The singer is now just playing guitar. I really miss Larry on vocals. I don't know why he's not. I think he just thinks the other guy, I don't know. I love Larry's style. I love the album. I love how he does it here. But he stays on guitar for the new release and the new releases. They've got a couple. And they've got a new singer in there too, which sounds great. It's just, when you're familiar with this style, this sound, you kind of miss it. So, but had to include that because that album just absolutely rocked my world and continues to. And so I was so glad to see that was, again, reissued on vinyl. And then the boys in Deliverance, as I mentioned a second ago, they are back. Different style. They kind of continued on in their style changes. Their previous album had moved a little bit more away from the straight up thrash, and they had gotten a little more into the think people like people said with Metallica's Black Album. Deliverance is doing the same thing. They're going a little more less thrashy and more just heavy in your face, heavy type stuff. If you're familiar with Deliverance, Jimmy's vocals are melodic. So it fits, and they continued to change and morph their sound, and have continued to this day. The kind of stuff that Jimmy's putting out, he's working on this Novella 2 album, the Novella 1 album. This is all radically different from the early Deliverance days, and this is pretty different too. Again, another one that was recently reissued on vinyl in the past year or 2 years, and it's still one of my favorite albums. This album it was just always on back in '93. Absolutely a must-have. When this was reissued on vinyl, I hit Jimmy up and said, hey, let's do an interview and talk about this album, Learn. And so if you go back on my channel to a couple years ago, you'll hear me and Jimmy Brown, vocalist, talking about the album, the reissue, and all that stuff. So great stuff, great guy, great band. Absolutely an album that at the time when it first came out, I immediately was kind of like, how do I accept this? But it didn't take long before this it's called Soak Your Brain, and it soaked your brain. Lovewar, people describe this as it's got a little bit of King's X, it's kind of a funky, not funky, I don't want to use that word, groove and hard rock. I don't know what it is. All I know is it's absolutely one of my favorite albums, even to this day. When they put this on vinyl again a couple years ago, I was so thrilled. The band did release another album not too long ago, not on vinyl, but they did release that, and love hearing anything from this particular lineup, this particular band. But absolutely, this album still to this day is one of my go-to albums from this time period, and just absolutely love every one of these songs. Great stuff. If you don't know Lovewar, it's not heavy. It's going to be straight in that middle of the road hard rock, and a little bit of proggy elements at times. Not really heavy though, prog elements, but again, it's kind of got the groove of a King's X. But it's just, and it's melodic. It's some great stuff. All right, now we're moving into number 2 and number 1. So Edge of Thorns, Savatage. I was always a big Savatage fan. This is the last album with Chris Oliver before he passed away. And these have all been recent reissues, which is what I've got. And it's a stellar album. I don't know of a Savatage album that I would point to and say that album just is a flop. They had their ups and downs, but I think all of them, I love all of them for various reasons. And so this one is, they changed. They got a new singer. I really like John Oliver's voice. Zach Stevens is good. So you got the John era and the Zach era. The bands feel a little different musically, even though it's the same guys for the most part. They changed some members in here, but they didn't do any drastic changes. And they've been consistently great. And I love the John Oliver years. I love the Zach Stevens years. And so rumor has it they're putting something new out. I'd love to hear it. After Chris passed away, they went on, with the other lineups. I did get to see them live when I lived in New York, which would have been after this era. It was probably 95. So at that point, they had Al on guitar. Anyway, yeah. It was a great show. Loved this band. Have loved this band since the 80s when I discovered them. So they had to be in there. And number 1 is going to be Still love this album. Still love this album. But so the band was a huge favorite of mine in the 80s. And then they got rid of their singer. And they put an album out, which is a great album, but it's not the same. It's just not the same. And then they were kind of absent for a little while, disappeared for a while. And then in 93, they come back with the original vocalist and put out Objection Overruled by Accept. And they continued to put a couple albums out with him and before they changed singers again. And I think that the Udo years of Accept post his return are almost just as powerful as the stuff of the 80s that we fell in love with. And this album, it came back, Blaze of Glory. I just fell in love with this album. And then the one that came after this, I'm sure is probably going to be on my top 10, Death Row, is just probably, again, one of my favorite albums. So I love the era of Udo either way. I mean, I love the new stuff too, but the Udo years, when he came back, it just seemed like the band was on fire again with some modern sounding metal. Great stuff. So there you go. Number one is the return of Udo Dirk Schneider to the Accept lineup and put out one great album and continued after that. So anyway, that's it for this one. Let me know who some of your top picks are. And, we'll see what happens with 94. Got to pull that list and see how we go from here. What happened in the 90s with the rest of me? Anyway, that's it for this one. Rock on and rock hard.